So, what did I do last night? What did I sit down and watch while I had my dinner? I loaded up the cutscenes for the new Spider-Man Miles Morales video game via YouTube on my Apple TV, so I could watch it on my television just like any other movie. And I had a fabulous evening. That's how far video games have come, that their cutscenes exist on their own. I not only review them as standalone movies, but I enjoy them as standalone movies. It's incredible. And I think the video game companies should be very proud of that. I think they should consider uploading it themselves, although they don't take down everybody who uploads their cutscenes. So I guess that's, they want you to play their game, obviously, so I guess this is a way to have your cake and eat it too. Although I have to say, watching the cutscenes, and you can see when the gameplay is supposed to come in, it seems to me like you're not so much playing a game, but just doing tasks to unlock the movie a piece at a time. And I'm curious, for those of you who do play this game, is it entertaining from that perspective? And besides just being entertaining, what I love about this is that it gives important clues as to what these larger franchises might be planning for, the official movies and television shows. Not just for what they might personally be interested in, but also because when a video game is super popular like this one, you know that the larger franchise won't be able to and won't want to ignore it. See, while the animated movie won an Oscar, it was so good. I'm so sad that it didn't do better at the box office. It was actually pretty weak at the box office, although I believe it's done quite well on streaming. And that's one of the reasons I think it's getting a sequel. But still, it wasn't the kind of success to really light a fire under the MCU to introduce Miles Morales themselves. But this video game, a cultural sensation since it was announced, I think that this is what it's going to take, we've all heard rumors that Miles Morales is going to swing through Spider-Man 3, and it really should be Najee Jeter. I think he does the motion capture and the voice work here, and that would be a way they could keep it a secret because they'd never have to even have any casting calls. I think he deserves it, and I think they just cast a voice actress who does Halo in the television show. So this would be it would be great to see the talent that brings these, like Troy Baker. We're going to talk about Troy Baker. This talent, I think, deserves to, especially when they look so much like the character they're portraying, which isn't always the case when you're doing voiceover work. But when they look like the character they're playing, they should play them like Troy Baker should. I think he does Last of Us, right? They're doing a Last of Us TV show. He should frickin' star in that because he's really talented. He, of course, here plays Simon Krieger. So, I think that Miles Morales, thanks to this game pretty much, will soon be swinging into the live-action MCU via Sony and then maybe get his own standalone movie. So here, on that note, we see Insomniac Games setting up how Peter and Miles could potentially coexist. Because remember, so far, 2 for 2, Miles only comes around when Peter Parker in his universe is killed. So here they're like, well, what if they both were there together? And I think that Miles here, they do a really great job of putting a timely cultural spin on your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I thought that was fantastic. So Peter looks after all of New York City, but Miles, new to the job, focuses on a smaller territory, his own people up in Harlem, who really need a hero. And of course he would want to protect because they're his people. The line, they think we're expendable and we can't let them get away with that, is very powerful and timely. It puts, I think, a really unique stamp on Miles Morales. It was great. It makes him like the opposite of Black Panther. Black Panther, of course, represents a proud African nation that dominates on the world stage in terms of power and technology. And, Miles is fighting, just like Spider-Man always has, is fighting for the little guy. So I just think that that's fantastic. Really, really strong space to carve out for Miles Morales. Also, the strong spotlight on Roxxon is just more evidence that Christian Bale will be playing Dario Agger in Thor: Love and Thunder, who works for that company. Roxxon really hasn't been on the scene in the MCU or anywhere really in Marvel in a really strong way since Iron Man 2. I think a few mistakes, though, were revealed here as well, and I hope Kevin Feige is sharp enough to notice what doesn't work. Because while overall I really enjoyed the storyline for Spider-Man Miles Morales, and it continues to showcase what a fabulous character Miles is. You know, sometimes I think Brian Michael Bendis does a bad job writing comics. I've told you before, I'll turn a page of a Bendis comic and it's just wall-to-wall writing, just like speech bubble after speech bubble. And you're like, this is the visual medium, Brian. But anyway, he forever should be, you know, a major comic book figure in the business because he created this character. And he, you know, and it just again goes to show you that while it's important to have people tell stories from their own communities and from their own perspective, that doesn't mean that someone from a different viewpoint can't create something that's just as wonderful for that community. Because Brian Michael Bendis is a white guy, and he created this wonderful character. Really a wonderful character. So good. But there are a couple of problems in the story. So I'll do a non-spoiler review first, and then I'll discuss the ending, which will obviously include spoilers. And don't worry, I'll tell you when they start. So the good. Amazing action sequences, almost better than movies because you so often slip into POV. And they use lots of slow motion moments right out of Zack Snyder's playbook. And it's as beautiful here as it is in his movies. Miles truly has an amazing power set, an incredible power set. I love his power set. He has an enviable power set. Peter even says he's a little jealous, and I don't blame him. And I think there's a small problem here, which we'll discuss in the bad. But on his own, Miles has an amazing power set. I really thought it was wonderful showcasing diverse communities. And Miles' Christmas dinner scene early on in the game with friends and family, I thought was really poignant and lovely. It's a really beautifully designed game. The dynamic of Miles having an angel and a devil on his shoulder, which Brian Michael Bendis came up with, his father and his uncle, continues to be absolute genius. However, the animated movie killed off the uncle, and the video game killed off the father. You need both of them for this to be as potent as it can be, and as it has been in the comic book. So I hope the MCU and Sony realize the importance of having them both there to reflect the hard and complicated choices in communities of color for everybody, not just, you know, the youth trying to figure out their path in life, and you know, they're tempted by that devil and that angel, but even it's complicated for the devil and the angel. So, and I think that triangle of morality really beautifully captures it. And I'm upset that both the animated movie and the video game messed it up. All right, so anyway, I loved the holiday theme, but you can still see elements of it here, which is why it's still in the good. All right, so I loved the holiday theming throughout the game. From Christmas decorations, charging through that mall at the beginning with Rhino. We don't have a mall like that in New York City, but I loved it. To just the falling snow in many scenes, and also seeing a heightened version of New York City, which was just beautifully rendered and designed. And I loved seeing Miles' neighborhood. It was a really cozy community feel. I thought it was incredibly well realized. I really felt all the locations felt like real places. Even Fisk Tower, which I thought was very cleverly used. I also think the authenticity of Miles representing youth of color is incredible. From his friends to what he enjoys to how he moves in action sequences, mimicking a lot of athletes of color. Really well researched and impressive. Everyone should hope for this level of respect and loving representation for their groups, because groups are different. Not everybody is. We're alike, but we're also different. And I thought that this was really indicative of that. Also, I thought that Miles' mother, Rio, had a lot of great lines, particularly as the story went on towards the end. I don't see why we have to lose the father to develop the mother, but okay, I guess I'll take it. But I thought she became a really interesting character, especially toward the end. All right, the bad. Yes, there's some bad. So too much science talk, way too much science talk. Not only is it boring to listen to, it's just like science class. You zone out. You're like, okay, you know, they called it the doohickey in the animated movie for a reason. It's a lot more fun to call it the doohickey. I thought that the animated movie did a better job with the science talk. And you know what else the animated movie did a better job with? It gave the science expertise to Peter Parker and, you know, the cool action and powers and heart to Miles. You have to divide up the goodies. If you give everybody the goodies, then it just makes someone too much. And I think that Miles, being as smart as Peter when it comes to science and having better powers, doesn't leave enough of a space for Peter to stand on his own still. And if they do that in the MCU, it'll make it harder for Peter fans to accept Miles. And I want everybody to get along. Also, I can finally see, and a lot of you are upset that Peter Parker in the MCU is so much like Tony Stark. You're like, he's like Iron Spider all the time. And I felt that way here. I was like, Tony Stark knows all this tech stuff and Bruce Banner and stuff like that. But not everybody in the MCU can be a scientific expert. It's just not realistic. And I just, I think it was nice to showcase science experts in the, in communities of color, and that science experts can come from anywhere, obviously, but it doesn't need to be Miles. He's already Spider-Man with amazing powers. And he's supposed to be a great artist. He has a lot of great things going for him. And he has a working knowledge of science to some degree, so he can keep up with everybody, but he should be a little bit behind, just to balance things out. Speaking of science, the Tinkerer and the Underground are ridiculously overpowered, with tech that can literally be anything they think up of, and seems to have a never-ending supply of material, right? Like, if you knock something out of their hand, don't worry, they can just generate something else immediately. I mean, it's just too much. It makes them uninteresting, it makes it too hard to be invested in them, and it makes it hard to follow them as villains. Usually, as I've, with these kinds of stories, half of the fun, or at least part of the fun, is trying to figure out how it's going to go down. But you're like, it's just, again, it's overpowered. You're like, oh, they're just going to imagine something and it's going to come up and it's going to be impossible to beat. Like, occasionally I would see like some Doc Ock's, things that reminded me of Doc Ock and stuff like that. But then I was like, but she's just imagining it. It's not like it came from anywhere. So, it doesn't even have the coolness of what they did with the Vulture in Homecoming, that he's using salvaged parts, and then you could try and guess where he got the parts from. That was fun. This was just too overpowered. And I didn't care for Phin until the very end, which, don't worry, we'll talk about that in the spoiler section. But I don't like the design of Insomniac's female characters. I don't think they come across as very compelling. I didn't like MJ and Black Cat in the Spider-Man game, and I don't think Phin really worked out here as well. It's great to see a strong female character of color, but it's even better when they're done really well. The story I also thought was a bit thin, and the stakes a little low until the very end, it seemed. So I thought that the story was a little weak, quite frankly. I thought the story, I thought the characters were so incredible, and the settings were so amazing, and the action was so great that I stayed invested, but I thought that the story they were actually trying to tell wasn't as good as it could have been. Here are some quick thoughts before we get to spoilers. The first suit that Peter gave him as a gift was so mean. I'm glad he upgraded it. I was like, is this a joke gift? You actually want me to wear this? This is like not a nice thing to do to someone. Krieger reminded me of Homelander. Didn't he remind you of Homelander? And also, I thought it was hilarious he did the Dr. Evil, I'm just going to assume it all went to plan move, right? He's like, I thought it was funny, the joke that he made about Leg Day, but at the same time, I'm like, that's right out of the Austin Powers jokes. But Troy Baker, once again, as I said, really delivered. I was just singing his praises in my review of the Avengers cutscenes because he did such a good job as Bruce Banner. And what a chameleon! I thought he was totally different here. I thought he was just fantastic. Also, isn't Miles worried about someone hacking his phone or app? That seems like he's very exposed there. And especially someone who's so into science, you think he would realize that he was exposed there. And then before we get to spoilers, I just want to give a shout out again to Insomniac Games and their cast, because the animation and the voice work and the motion capture were really just incredible. And they represented a very diverse group of people across the board, and they did it authentically, and I thought it was just really, really impressive. All right, spoilers. So, I really didn't like Miles' enemy being a childhood friend. I hate that kind of stuff, as you know, and I think it made Miles' world seem too small. And, it's like, what a coincidence! The greatest enemy in the city comes from the same exact place as its new hero. I'm like, that never happens. And I understand they wanted to create a fork in the road situation for these two people, but it's too much like what it's supposed to be between Uncle Aaron and his father. And that's what I would prefer. So maybe if you hadn't killed one off, we could do that storyline. And again, I thought Phin was just way too overpowered. I don't know where did she even get the material to make that stuff? It was just too much. I did, though, find the death of her brother incredibly touching. I thought that sequence was so well done. I teared up. I felt when he was he was locked in there and it was going to explode and he told her to look away. That was really powerful. And that's a credit to the actors there in particular. The actor playing her brother, and I think the actor playing her brother and her uncle, the two actors playing her brother and Uncle Aaron, I thought were great. And not the type of characters you usually see in these types of games or stories. And I thought it was wonderful to have them there. I thought just so great. So fantastic. As for the ending, I thought that's when everything finally clicked. And I was like, this just got real good. Phin and Miles, at that moment, I liked both of them. I thought it was beautiful, the ending, when she turned on her sneakers and ran up the side of the building. Finally, I was like, okay, we'll accept it because it's just so cool. And then when she flew into the sky and sacrificed herself, and they exploded in this beautiful light show, it was beautiful not only visually but emotionally. However, I was shocked that there was no end credit tease that she was going to come back, because as I said, at that moment, I was like, you know what, Phin, maybe you are okay. And I'd love to see her come back as a ghost in the machine, like her spirit, in her tech. That would be really cool. And I would suspect that she would. All right, because, it's just too good of a missed opportunity not to do that. I loved having his neighborhood find out his secret identity and protecting him. That was a genius. You could take that for the MCU. No, I've never seen anyone do that yet in the comic books or in the animated movie. And I thought that the twist of having the whole community know who their Spider-Man is and protecting that secret from the press and getting his mask and giving it back to him. I mean, that's like Westerns when, everybody knows who the protector of the town is. I mean, that's just great stuff. I loved it. And it really focuses on how particularly communities of color these days really stick together. I loved it. I thought that was probably one of the most brilliant things in the movie. Also, I thought it was interesting that Aaron flipped on Krieger. And I love that Krieger was like, deep fakes, they're deep fakes. And you're like, these days, he could be telling the truth. So that's why it's good that Aaron flipped on him. And I must have kept some evidence to give to the authorities. And then I thought at the end, the second end credit sequence when Miles calls his mother, I thought what she said about Phin and Aaron, that you just can't judge them. You just have to remember who they were because of the complex choices that they made that were good and bad, was really sophisticated stuff. And then she said that, Aaron might have done a lot of good and saved people, but every time I look at him, I can't help but think of the pain that he caused your father when he was alive. And I was like, you can't fault that. She's speaking the truth. I thought that was really, really great. And I love the end shot of Peter and Miles in action together. Then, of course, you have the end credit sequence, which sets up the next adventure here. And that's where Harry is still locked up. They teased that he had the Venom symbiote at the end of the Peter Parker game. And Dr. Connors is like, I don't think he's with all his animals, all of his lizards in his lab. And, Norman Osborn comes in doing a full Trump. I think that I can understand wanting to make all, businessmen to go in that direction, but I think that it's too obvious at this point, and too many people have done it, and I don't think we want that political baggage in this game. I think we're all just trying to move on at this point. But so I would not want to see Norman Osborn go down that path. I'm curious to see what happens with Harry and if Venom will be the big villain. And it would be interesting to have Harry start out with the Venom symbiote instead of with the Peter situation. It would be a very different origin. And I think that Harry hasn't really been a big factor here. So it would be a very different story. And my curiosity is piqued as to how Insomniac wants to handle it. And I'm also interested to see how Miles would factor into one of Peter's adventures now that Miles is fully developed. Perhaps one mission or one adventure where Miles would be there. And then I think after the next Peter Parker game, they'll totally switch back to another Miles game because the character has proven to be so popular. So I think it's great going back and forth between the two of them. And will we get Spider-Woman in here too? And, maybe go, they'd have to release a lot of games. But you guys, you can play this in a day, right? This kind of a game. It's a shorter one than the Peter Parker one was, so I think you could do it. And then they'll start competing with movies and TV for release date spots. Very interesting. All right, so what did you think? What did you like? What did you think could be better? And what do you think of the future of video games? Share your thoughts down below. Mark any comments that are spoilers as such. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.